uploaded to the YouTube as well. Yeah, I said the YouTube for some reason, but YouTube as well, just so you have that access to that. I did check the team folders. We do have some stuff in some of the team folders. There's not stuff in every team folder, and I didn't see necessarily documents in every team folder that said problem statement, solution statement. Some I did, some I didn't. So I'm guessing that some are in the stages of having their material ready and some aren't. And that's okay, because we spent a couple of days kind of figuring out the teams, which I royally messed up at the first glance, and that's my bad. First time for that, but maybe not the last time. Just got the numbering wrong. Appreciate everyone's patience. We actually have lost one member of our team, and we've done some shuffling up from that as well. And hopefully we have all the teams right, but if we do need to do some fine adjustments, we can do that too. I will say that the teams are important, but they're not as important as you may think. You're not actually joining a founder group where you're going to form a company that you have to, go long haul, right? So some of the other dilemmas that we generally work through with founders probably aren't going to be the case with y'all. I mean, lifestyle conflicts and different things like that, who's doing what and responsibilities. Everyone should kind of be throwing themselves into this about the same amount and same pace. But if there's any adjustments, we'll make those. But we're also going to be working on this as a team, right? So, and when I say a team, not just the individual teams, as a big team, right? I'll be working with all y'all as a group, but also y'all as individuals. So if anybody feels like you're behind, if you feel like you don't have enough help, all you gotta do is reach out to anyone. We still have a few alumni on the group, at least two in the groups, and myself, of course, is here to help anybody along the way as well. So what I usually do is ask for volunteers of who wants to start reading their problem statement and solution statement to me first. What I'd like to do is just kind of hear it, and then we'll talk about each one of those things. So if we have any volunteers, that'd be great. If not, I can start calling team names, however you want to do it. It's fine with me. So do we have anybody who wants to go first? Somebody maybe
I can volunteer us for imaging agents. We can go, but I will say in full transparency, we did not do a solution statement.
Okay.
So I have a problem statement for you.
Let's start there. And just since you brought that up, and since you were honest with me on that one and everyone else, I think that's fine. That's no problem whatsoever. We want to get to the point where we have the problem statement, the solution statement, and the unique value proposition by week 3, right? So today we're going to talk about customers, and then next week we're going to talk about unique value proposition. So really, I want to have the problem statement and the solution statement really wrapped up really, really well. And then this week, we're going to add customer identification to that. So we can have those two things by next week, then we'll be perfect. And then we'll add unique value proposition by that for week 4, and then we'll be all right. Okay. So if you don't have the problem statement perfect and we don't have the solution statement just yet, that's okay. We can work on it a few more days and get it wrapped up by next week. So let's hear your problem statement.
Okay. Do you want me to share it or do you want me to just read it?
You can just read it. It's fine with me.
Okay. So for the imaging agents, this is what we've come up with. Ophthalmologists practicing domestically and internationally lack effective tools for detecting and monitoring the progression of retinal diseases. The significant absence of imaging techniques that are capable of visualizing molecular markers in the eye impedes the early diagnosis and assessment of therapeutic responses post long-term treatment. As a result, the quality of life of individuals afflicted with eye diseases such as retinopathy, age-related macular degeneration, proliferative diabetic retinopathy, and retinal vein occlusion is severely impaired by blindness and resistance to available therapies. Developing a reliable solution to detect this problem would greatly benefit both patients and healthcare providers in the field of ophthalmology.
Okay, that very solid. I heard who's, what's. The where's was basically a contextual where, this situation happens with this stuff, but it's not necessarily it happens in this context of a place or anything like that. It's just a certain set of circumstances. I even heard the how at the end, right? Which is a call out to the solution. So I think that was very good. I think it was also pretty concise. At first blush, I don't think there's much that I would suggest you change with it Although I think that when you start mapping up a solution statement to that, as well as when we start layering in some of the customers, that might alter the problem statement a little bit, because the problem statement, as we discussed last week, is really the first piece of the foundation of that 60-second elevator pitch or 90-second elevator pitch. So it will adjust over time. But what you just did, and anyone else, please provide feedback to Jacqueline as well. What you just did is pretty concisely lay out a problem that I don't think anyone, certainly in this room, in context of kind of the sciencey people that we are, would have much difficulty understanding what you're talking about and the context that you supplied that in with the problem that we're talking about. The only thing that maybe we could talk about is the scale of the problem. And it doesn't have to be like going into great depth about how large the problem is or how expansive the problem is, but you could introduce some sort of statement of because I didn't think I heard it, and if I you said it and I didn't hear it, I apologize, but I don't think I heard anything that's kind of gave it the scale of how many people are affected by this and how many people in this case, the problem statement could be how many people are affected by it. You could also layer in something in the solution statement about how many people would be impacted by a solution, but somewhere between the two. And effectively, it would be better if it was in part of the hook, because then you can kind of say how big the hairy problem is, right? So on the next pass, where you're making the solution statement, kind of think about how to set a larger context about how big the problem is in your problem statement.
Yeah, I was Googling, but it's like ophthalmology general. So we definitely we talked about reaching out to our founder.
That was going to be my next suggestion, is reaching out to the tech transfer office and the IP holders, see what because they would know the numbers of patients that are suffering from these, both with the younger crowd and the older crowd. Because remember, there was the older macular degeneration type crowd, the aging ocular issues, but then there was that younger crowd too that was having that issue with the, that he was expressing as well. So I mean, there's two segmentations that might be a part of this. One might be larger than the other. One might be a more growing problem, twofold actually. One might be a growing problem because the age that is growing between the people between ages of 50 and 80, right? And we all have eyes that are just really failing us on a daily basis as we get older. And then there's also the issues just in the younger situation, that he was expressing as well, that have been just kind of grossly overlooked or misdiagnosed, because those dots and that scar tissue and everything else has just been kind of like, what is that? We don't know what that is, so we don't have anything for it, right? So check with your teams, your science teams, see what that impact is that could be from how big the problem is. Good work.
Thank you.
Okay, who's next?
I can go next.
Perfect.
So I am on Team Biosalts.
Okay.
We each wrote a problem statement. We haven't written solution statements either. I don't think I realized solution statement was part of this assignment, so my bad.
Right. It is now for next week, so
great.
Circle back around on it.
Yes. Okay. So my problem statement says the addition of cryoprotectants is necessary for storage of many biological materials due to instability of molecular structures during freeze-thaw cycles. Common cryoprotectants such as DMSO, glycerol, and tween can be toxic or require high concentrations and removal before the biological material can be used, which is time-consuming and potentially damaging. Therefore, there is a need for potent small molecules as cryoprotectants that are biologically derived for decreased toxicity.
Okay. Again, I heard the what's, the kind of the where context of what we're talking about here. Like, we're talking about cryopreserved products and the failures that occur when that cryopreservation starts. And I'm gonna stop right there, because it's like I started to hear kind of that breakdown, but not quite enough, right? I think maybe your statement, and I don't know if that was an aggregation of all y'all's problem statements or that was just yours, Megan, but it first of all, let me back up, because I like to give positive to before I started doing informed as well. It's like I think that was a very concise, well-worded problem statement. So don't get me, don't take this feedback as being constructive in the wrong way. So I mean, I think you're pretty close to having a very well-formed, concise problem statement, but I do think it needs more meat. I do think it needs more hook, right? I think probably an area that you should focus into is a little bit more on the aspect of how damaging these other forms of cryopreservation can be when the cryopreservation breaks down itself, and how that breaking down breaks down the product that it is supposedly cryopreserved. In essence, it's no longer preserved, right? Because if you have, you know, some inanimate object, right? These glasses, and I preserve these. When I preserve them, I should be able to preserve these glasses with 100%, intact, right? But if the cryopreservation, the thing that's keeping it intact, breaks down and then breaks down this, then I have breakage, I have loss, I have revenue loss from this, right? Okay, just because of the thing I chose to actually protect this, right? So something needs to be contextually in there of that when I'm using those other forms, that I'm running the risk of losing my product, right? Which is, you did say that in so many words, but I think it needs to be a little bit more that, the traditional methods that we've used for cryopreservation are fraught with opportunity for not just the product, the preservation aspect, material medium to break down, but that medium's breaking it down, breaks down the product it's trying to preserve. And in cases of biomaterial, this could be deadly, right? Or this could be, when it's tissue or samples or things that are one of one, you've lost that sample, right? And I think that's something also, as you're moving into your pitch deck, these are some of the examples you can give when you have more time, right? I mean, if we're talking about blood samples and tissue samples and or eggs, things in fertility, things that have to be cryopreserved. I mean, we're talking about things that are one of one again. If they're not cryopreserved with the right stuff and they break down, they're lost. They never can be reclaimed. So I think y'all need a little bit more meat, a little bit more hook, a little bit more grab with your problem statement. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
All right. Who's next?
I can jump in.
All right. Go ahead.
So I'm on the paper diagnostics team, and we didn't really have a specific problem to address. It was very nebulous. So I picked a specific antigen that we could kind of pursue, and built the problem statement off of that. Mm-hmm. So there is no instant and inexpensive way for sexually active individuals to test themselves for STDs and STIs. Individuals who engage in any form of unprotected sex, especially men who have sex with other men, are at a much higher risk of contracting STDs and STIs. Currently, if an individual wants to know their status, they have to schedule STD testing with their healthcare provider. However, it can take days to receive results, which is incompatible with the often spur-of-the-moment interactions many individuals participate in. This issue is particularly acute in gay communities where frequent unprotected sex occurs often. The AIDS epidemic indicated how dangerous sexually transmitted diseases can be, and currently other STDs such as chlamydia and syphilis are treated as they occur with antibiotics. With the rise in antibiotic resistance, our healthcare system could soon face a crisis of antibiotic-resistant STDs without a rapid, inexpensive way to screen for these diseases.
Okay. I love the context you're setting. Okay, so here's lots. Okay, so I got lots of comments for this one for one particular reason. One is you said there's not really a problem, and I think what you're really saying is there's lots of different ways to apply the solution, right? I mean, there's just countless ways. I mean, we could talk about third, fourth, and fifth world countries. We could talk about global pandemics. We could talk about just dozens of different applications, right? So I get it. Okay. So I think it's great that you've chosen something. The thing you chose, I also think is great. I have no problem with it whatsoever. Okay. I don't think anything is off limits if you can wrap a business narrative around it. And so what I'm saying is like, I think that's great. Now, I think there's some areas that you were too kind of superfluous in the facts that you're adding to it that kind of drew away from it. Like the AIDS epidemic can never be dismissed as being one of the most largest situations that was tragic. And we can talk about that for days and hours about how bad it was. But is it is it the relevant thing to bring up now, as opposed to what the other stuff you were saying about STDs and the way that our current situation is around needing tests? And because I thought that the other things you said were very, very pertinent around it, where you need access, you need easy, cheap, quick OTC, over-the-counter access to STD testing, so that individuals can feel safe about, right? And I think that, and then you laying in the context about the homosexual community and everything else and how important that is, because you don't want a repeat of the AIDS epidemic, I think that gives the kind of the context and kind of that TED Talk period at the end that says, where it's really kind of presenting that as kind of like this, the end statement of like, look, we can't revert back to where we had no testing whatsoever, where it became a global pandemic of misinformation, a global pandemic of people dying, right? Because we had nothing to shed light on the truth. With an easy, efficient, cheap, paper-based sensor platform that people can pick up over the counter at their local Walgreens in a matter of seconds and have test results in a matter of minutes, then we can have that assurity of understanding what's going on with our bodies. And AIDS testing or STD testing is just merely one thing. We can and see where I'm going with that. I'm opening up the opportunity to say it could be Ebola, it could be H1N1, it could be anything that we have also all recognized as being something that could kill us, that we need paper-based, that this solution would also come to bear very, very importantly for. You see what I'm getting at? So I think yours was very contextually sensitive around a good business point, right? That had a market associated with it that can actually kind of parlay into a larger market conversation. I think the facts that you brought up might have been better suited to add as a declarative statement at the end of avoidance of like, we don't want to have this, because so this solution is important thusly. And that might wrap the whole problem statement in a more concise way. Make sense?
Yep. Thanks.
Great. Okay, anybody from BioFace? 3D? Yes, ready to go with problem statement? Mary? No? It's okay. It's okay. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We have another week between today and Thursday. I want to see the problem statement and the solution statement. So with the feedback that I gave you, refine your problem statements. For those that haven't had a problem statement, Mary and the rest of the BioFace team, go ahead and send it to me in the next couple of days so I can give you the feedback right now, just over email, right? And then we can work on the solution statement once I give you any feedback from that. Let me take a side step and tell you that I'm the type of teacher that encourages the use of ChatGPT and AI tools and stuff like that. Okay, so if anybody y'all use those, you don't have to raise your hand. Okay, so you don't have to. Okay, see, Jacqueline, I love the vulnerability and everything else. I use it all the time, and sometimes I say I use it, and sometimes I say I don't. But I've conditioned mine to be a duplicate of me, right? I have a conversation of me with my ChatGPT, right? And so I am generating content all the time about my thoughts. So I'm a big proponent of ChatGPT and AI tools, Bard, whatever you want to use. Stay away from Microsoft because it's very pissy, right? But the other AI tools, go for it. So when you're doing these things, utilize those tools to generate your questions, to help you generate your questions about like how you would discover some of the material, some of the things that would lead you to that. I don't like it when people just say, hey, write my problem statement for me. I would rather you work with things like that to get to a point where you understand why the problem statement works for you and what the context is there. But I'm saying that as a side note, utilize tools like that. I don't care. I'm not going to call you on it. In fact, if it comes out with something really great, Juliana knows and earlier this year, I challenged people to use ChatGPT because it kind of early on, I was like, hey, let's see what we can do with it, right? So now I'm like, hey, let's embrace it. Okay, so let's all refine our problem statements. Let's all come up with a solution statement before next Thursday. And then I'm going to add a little bit more homework to it, but it's really going to be more of just your general thoughts. It's not going to be a lot of pain or consternation of coming up with another set of kind of statements. Okay, so I'll go over all the homework here in a bit. Any questions about problem statements? is there time to pitch one more? Juliana, you want to pitch one more? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm also part of the biosalts team. I just wanted to
Go ahead. Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
I thought some of the feedback you gave was pretty good, but yeah, so formation of ice within biological products and food can lead to quality degradation and adverse health effects in consumers, underscoring the necessity for an enhanced approach to long-term freezing and storage of these items.
You can't get more concise than that. I mean, that I'd be like, that's your 15-second problem sentence, right? Juliana, Juliana, she's gone through this process before. She's heard me say these statements several times, and we've worked together a few times since the last thing. But that was a very, very concise statement. And Megan, that's what I was kind of talking about. She kind of set that up as, this is very damaging. It's the traditional use of the old ways of doing it, and the current ways of doing it can be very damaging to the product that it's preserving, right? So I think coalescing y'all's problem statements, and I like the idea of having people write their own and then kind of coalescing them together to make the best of the best. So y'all put y'all's heads together and come up with the right problem statement. I think y'all probably have the two pieces that can fit together.
Yep, I like that you brought up the market piece. I think in terms of hours, there could be two, one food and like biopharmaceuticals. So that's something we'll definitely explore more as we go on.
So as long as we're talking about it, and I like to kind of necessarily not jump into rabbit holes, but let's see if we can't teeter around the hole here. Which one do you think is more of a viable market? I mean, you're early on, but at one point, so here's why I'm asking that is, and we'll talk about this a little bit today, but I'm gonna go ahead and bring it up. We like to talk about what the beachhead is. All right. So when you're launching a product, you cannot, and we said this last week, if you're launching a product that is made for everyone, it's made for no one. If you're launching a product that's made for you, then it's made for no one. Right. So you have to pick what is your beachhead market. This is going to be the early adopters, maybe the innovators, and maybe it's part of the early mass market, but it's really the early adopters. It's the ones that you're going to have to convince the least, but you still have to convince them to buy your product, right? These are going to be people that actually give you money, not the ones that you're going to maybe even pay to use your product through paid pilots or give it to them for free, right? They're actually going to pay you for it, but it can be rough around the edges. So looking at the two markets, and I don't want an answer right now, so I'm just opening this up as a question that you need to do discovery for. It's like, you need to look at the marketplaces, and we're going to talk about this. So I'm just going to introduce it now. I'm going to show you something here in a minute or later about what the total addressable markets are for those areas, right? And then tell me through the narrative that we're going to build, which one is the better one? Which one is also the easiest one to get to first, right? Medical waste and healthcare and everything else, it's a major billion, trillion, if you start adding all the pieces together, $1 trillion industry, right? So is food, right? Both are global. Okay. You can't differentiate. So far, I can't differentiate between the two, but which one is going to be easier to go to? Okay. Hospitals and healthcare, you have insurance, you have third-party payers, you have all these different things. It can be difficult to maneuver for a startup. Life sciences related to agriculture and related to food services and things like that, a little bit easier to penetrate. Now, this is a life sciences Scipreneur thing here. So I do want to see that we stick into that life science side, but life science on the farm and agriculture side is still what we talk about here. So you can go either way. All right. So I leave it open to y'all, and we'll talk about markets here tonight. So it's a great question, Juliana, because it's exactly what we're about to talk about. Any other questions? Okay, let's go ahead and get started then. I'm gonna pin my screen so you can see it full. Okay. All right. So we went over homework. We're gonna go over market segmentation and market. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Why are you using game chat?
Why am I using what? Hello? That question might not have been for me. Okay, so we're doing homework review. We've done that. We did market segmentation, market discovery. We'll talk about customer identification, customer buying behavior, and we'll go over homework. Yeah, if everybody can go on mute, go off video, that's fine. I'm about to do my kind of long monologue here for the next hour and 15 minutes or so. We'll probably get out a little bit earlier tonight than we did last week, and then we'll go over homework right before we do. We will have office hours tomorrow between 3 to 5. If you want some office hours, just call me. I do have a couple of short meetings during that period of time, so I will need to schedule those with y'all, but reach out to me in email after the session tonight, and we'll schedule that. Okay. All right. So we did homework review. So what is your market? That's something we are going to tackle tonight. And really, you're going to do some homework on trying to figure out what your market is. I encourage y'all to reach out now during this period of time between tonight and next week with the tech transfer offices, if that's the point of contact that's in that spreadsheet that I shared with you, or directly your IP holders. They have done research. I mean, part of their research is to understand what the marketplace is. Sometimes we do get research where it's just for the research. It's just a technology that they're pushing forward. They don't necessarily have a market identified yet, but it's technology that the university wants to push forward. It's innovation that someone feels could start a market or be part of a market, but doesn't actually have a market identified or segmented yet. But for the most cases, most of the IP that I work with, they do have some sort of understanding of what the market is. So reach out to them, see what their thoughts are, but then also just don't take those for granted. We really want to make sure that we're challenging that information to make sure it's accurate. And a lot of times what we'll do is introduce new information that they hadn't thought of before. And that's our goal here, okay? All right, so we're gonna start off with market segmentation. Market segmentation is the big picture around how we classify customers. Certainly when we break down customers, we're going to break them down all the way down to the persona level. What is a representation of a prototypical customer for you? It might be a patient. It might be someone on the supplier side that's applying and doing the cryopreservation. It could be some other technology that's licensing your technology and implementing it inside their product. There could be a consumer and there could be a customer, and we'll talk about a few of those things. But right now we're talking about the big picture of the market itself. And the market is segmented in a variety of different ways, but it's the division of those markets that defines what a segmentation is. And understanding how those markets are segmented is extremely important to start breaking down and peeling the onion, if you will, of figuring out how we're going to go to what we'll classify as the beachhead, and how we'll start figuring out what parts of the customer base we're going to go to first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. We will talk about, I believe I have it in this presentation. I'll certainly will share it with you. If I don't, I know it's in the toolkit, but we'll talk about the crossing the chasm. I mentioned it earlier, how there's 5 major segments of customers in that. There's the innovators and early adopters, and there's this large chasm that is very difficult for startups to kind of jump over to get to the early majority and then the late majority in the mass market area, but kind of think of it as a bell curve, and we'll show you what that is. But these are all kind of different ways to segment the markets and segment the customers. And the better understanding you have around how markets are segmented, the better you're going to align your product and align your value chain, the things that your customer is going to want out of your product, the value, the benefits, the better you're going to be able to align those to what their needs are and what they're expecting, right? So the first step in the big onion peeling process is understanding the big picture, which is the market segmentation, okay? Generally, segmentation is broken down in these 4 areas, and we'll go through these, but there's the demographic of who, the psychographic of kind of how and what they think, the behavior. Well, I mean, more of like how they kind of just go about things in life and their tendencies and everything else, but there's also the behavior, how they react to things and how they make decisions. We'll talk about something called the FOG behavioral model. And then there's geographic. We obviously make different decisions based on who we are. I mean, I'll give you a really big one. iPhone versus Android. It's like a daily thing, it seems like right now. Everyone knows iPhone is the largest market holder inside the United States. And what most people in the United States don't know that have an iPhone, not calling anybody out here on this call, is that Android is by and large, the largest market holder by almost 80% in the entire globe, right? So there's this segmentation that is very naturally unnatural around in one geographic area. They think and know that they're the majority holder, and they are, but in the rest of the geographic area, they're the minority of product owners. So it's a really interesting thing, but you can very clearly see the geographic different segmentation between the two. And trust me, there's a ton of marketing that Apple does here that they just don't care about globally. And that's because they got a lock on the United States and they don't have a lock internationally. So there's these ways to segment these, and the marketing campaigns and the products and everything that go along with it kind of get sliced and diced or related around these segmentations. And I don't have a lot of time to go into these things in great detail. So during this process, what we'll do is introduce you to certain bits of information. And I encourage you to kind of go a little bit deeper if you want to. Some of the stuff I'm going to go through tonight is pretty high level, and you can kind of leave it at high level. This is one of those areas, but certainly go on to Google, find out more information about market segmentation in these areas, but we're going to talk about a little bit more tonight. All right, another concept is that you've probably heard of is addressable markets, available markets, obtainable markets. These are important for you, and so this is in context really a good thing for you to y'all to understand. Is how do we look at the size of markets, right? So we just talked about how we kind of segment those markets, and we'll go into detail of that. But this is also the size of markets, right? So when we're talking to VCs and we're talking to other funding sources, they want to know what their total market opportunity could be. Well, the big picture is that total addressable market. This is the entire thing. This is when we talk about how telemedicine and telemonitoring is an $820 billion industry worldwide with a 30% CAGR or opportunity to grow over the next 7 years or 5 years, right? Those kind of numbers, and don't hold me to it. They're somewhat like that. I can't remember. I did it in a deck about 4 months ago, but those numbers are the total addressable market global for a specific market, which is the telemonitoring and telehealth market. It's not the entire healthcare market. It's just that segmentation of that market is worth that much value, right? Now, as a startup, and I actually have a startup that I'm working on with some founders that has a product for a capnography, which measures the end-tidal CO2 that is expressed from your lungs. It's similar to pulse oximetry, which is something you measure in your finger or through your blood to measure your pulse ox. But capnography is a better way of measuring your respiratory distress, right? So we have built a product that you take home with you, and it can monitor you 24 hours a day remotely, and so on and so forth. That total addressable market, as I mentioned, is over $800 billion for telemonitoring, telemedicine, and respiratory distress is over 60% of the general ailments at the ages of 50 to 80 for people kind of having those problems in that space for that market. So 60% of that $800 billion is roughly related to respiratory distress. Okay, now I ask you, as a startup founder, if I were to be the founder, would I go to a VC and say, we're going to go get $800 billion worth of business? No, there's no way that we're going to get $800 billion worth of business, or 60% of $800 billion worth of business. The total addressable market is not what you're saying you're going to go get. The service available market, the next level down, is a segment of that market that says that this is something that's in my geographic reach, right? But still, I'm not going to say it. So I might say the telemonitoring, telehealth large picture is $800 million or $1 billion, but the respiratory stress in a United States is $100 billion, right? So I'm gone from 800 billion to 100 billion just from the TAM to the SAM, and they call them TAM, SAM, and SOM, right? So now I'm starting to kind of, again, just use that analogy, peeling away the onion of saying, okay, here's what I'm saying is the total big picture. Here's what I'm saying is kind of the big picture within my reach, if everything goes perfect. And then I'm saying, okay, within reason, what portion of that SAM, that addressable, available market, can I realistically go obtain within a specific given reasonable period of time? And so I might say within the first 18 months or the first 5 years, I'm going to go get 10% of that SAM, right? So if I said that was $100 million, I'm going to go get 10 million of that in the first year, right? So the idea there is to kind of understand the markets to a point where I can break down those into their value, their worth rather, and then see how much I can realistically go achieve. We may, if we can get to it, try to have a slide like this in the pitch deck to kind of give an understanding of what the market is about. So if you want to go ahead and start thinking about it for your general areas, after we get through the problem statement and the solution statement, really start thinking about what these can be. You can even check with some of the AI tools that are more current than ChatGPT to give you the TAM, SAM, and SOM. You'll be very surprised with the information you'll get back. You'll get some really good information back around these numbers. You can start collecting these numbers because we will utilize these as the weeks progress as part of your financial statements in your pitch deck, specifically the TAM, SAM, and SOM. Okay, so here's some segmentation considerations. So going back to that slide, because I realized that other slide was out of order here, but we went over it anyway. So geographic, customers are grouped based on location. Demographic, customers are grouped based on certain characteristics, may include ethnicity, gender, age, marital status, education. Behavioral, customers are grouped by their native or learned preferences. And then firmographic, same as demographic, yet focuses on organizations and not individuals. So this is the business side of things. So these are industries, right? So they're segmented by industry. So these are the kind of business side. So you have a variety of different ways of breaking down the segmentations of customers, like we said, through geographic or some sort of demographic or behavioral or psychological or psychographic, but also you have the next level up from that, which is the corporate side of things, where you have supply chain or life sciences or healthcare or agriculture. These are firmographic type industry level segmentations where you might have a product that you're selling to this. In our context, this might be a licensing situation where you're licensing to an industry where you have a technology that an entire industry might utilize. This happens a lot in our mobility space, happens a lot in our healthcare space, happens a lot with our therapeutics and pharmaceuticals that are utilized in a variety of different therapeutics. So we'll see this a lot of business to business type licensure between life science technologies and other industries. Psychographic, the intersection of behavioral tendencies and core beliefs, and then a combination of all the above, just kind of like you have this amalgamation of just different segmentations. Those are the ones that are more difficult, but you can still break them down once you understand what the drivers are for those kind of segmentations, right? So if you have something that, and if you can think about it, obviously geographic is kind of the big picture, but inside that you'll have behavioral and you'll even have firmographic and you'll have psychographic inside of that, ethnographic, all these different things. So breaking the segmentations down, this is kind of going back to kind of that scientific method of we're going to start breaking down the problem, building our hypothesis, testing the hypothesis, looking at the results, and then breaking it down even further. Continuing with the segmentation, continuing until we have so much data that we understand truly what our market space is, so we can start planning and executing on how we're going to penetrate that market and how we're going to bring our product to that market. Okay, so here's some segmentation types, and these are important for you to understand, especially in some of the healthcare space. We don't have any pharmaceuticals here. But we do, I think we have a couple that might fit in the space, but we'll talk about these when we get to the segmented ones. So the segmentation types. So those are the segmentation considerations. Now there's some types here. So there's mass market. Typically, these are the marketers don't distinguish between different customer segments. These are just really, really large. Facebook, Twitter, now X, large scale applications that are used like, TikTok, 150 million Americans use that. Several billions of people around the world use that. Same goes with what we now call X, the worst marketing decision ever made in the history of man or people, any person. Just a horrible decision. But that is still a mass market product, right? Because it doesn't really segment to a certain type of individual. Lots and lots and lots of different people use that. So these mass market products are certainly across the board. And certain pharmaceuticals are mass, aspirin, different thing, Tylenol, lots of different people, anybody with an issue, but it transcends kind of the other things, the tendencies. They all have a medical ailment, so they're taking an aspirin, right? So it's certainly mass market. The opposite of that is niche, right? Or niche, something that caters to a very specific specialized customer segments. We see this a lot in healthcare, especially with therapeutics these days, where the pharmaceutical itself just being prescribed in a very specific way is not doing the trick anymore. Actually understanding how to apply a therapy to the drug where the drug alters in its makeup, not necessarily the drug alters, but the application of the drug is altered during the therapeutic cycle of the patient care. So the patient is getting a different dosage at different times based on how effective that drug is, right? Certain drugs help certain people, right? So this is really a drug will help this person do this. So it's very niche in some of these cases. Also, we have products that help very specific forms of cancer these days, right? So that's a very small people. It might only be 100,000 people around the world have this very specialized form of cancer. So it's a very niche product, but the amount of health care costs that are associated with that segmentation absolutely demand a solution, right? So even though it's a small group of individual, 100,000 to 8 billion, it is a viable market, right? But it's a niche market. Okay. Then there's segmented, a model that distinguishes between segments with slightly different needs and problems. I think a great example of talking about this is sometimes when you talk about third-party payers, where there's different things. You have one group paying, another group consuming. Again, consumers and customers. You have one person that's going to utilize the product, but someone paying for the product, just to kind of say that in a slightly different way. But these are segmented as well, of just saying, you know, there's multiple customers kind of in this process. So it can be all and part of it. So it's a model that distinguishes between segments with slightly different needs and problems, but they're all part of the same group, right? Then there's diversified, serving two or more unrelated customer segments with very different needs and very problems, with the same product kind of there, but they're utilizing it in different ways. So it's very diversified. So you might have to have a diversified portfolio of products to cater to the diversified needs, right? So this one's very difficult. This is probably the most difficult there is. And then multi-sided, serving two or more interdependent customers. I had a product like this where I had to sell one product to my primary customer that would then sell a value-added product to their customer, right? So it was a B2B2C kind of situation where I sold to a business and the business sold to a consumer. And it was difficult to kind of stand up the value proposition, because not only did I have to sell my customer, I had to sell my customer on how to sell to their customer, right? So it was kind of this multi-sided approach where they were interdependent to each other for me, and they were also interdependent for each other for them. So I had to sell something that was kind of cascading 2 levels down on value propositions, that I had to really come up with a narrative that essentially allowed my primary customer to be my salesperson to sell to my secondary customer, right? So that's what multi-sided means. Okay, so that's market segmentation, market considerations, and I even threw in there the TAM, SAM, and SOM for market worth. This all is the top level of the kind of customer pillar we're talking about. So last week we said we're going to talk about problem and solution, and then we'll talk about the third leg of the stool, which is customer. And that's what we're talking about here. And the first part of that is market, right? So customers make up a market. So we've talked about the customer considerations, we've talked about customer segmentation, talked about TAM, SAM, and SOM, which is market worth. Now we're going to start breaking down kind of like how do you start figuring out what the market is for you to consider to be your beachhead. And it's, again, same guy that you saw before, my favorite picture, you know, kind of sparking the inner scientist in you and the inner brainchild to kind of start doing that discovery process. So observation is key, always is, in everything we do, especially when you're trying to discover a solution or discover an answer to something. I shouldn't use the word solution since we use that in other contexts. But right now we're trying to find out information. We're trying to find an answer. The question of this answer is what market. The question that we're trying to ask is what market. The question we're trying to ask is also what customer inside that market, right? So we start off with the market, observing the defining the phenomenon. That's what we start with in the observation. Problem, market, or need doesn't matter. Developing hypothesis. We said this a few minutes ago about solution to the problem, the business idea, in other words, and conducting experiment to test the hypothesis. And that means getting out of the building and going out and testing it. So when we start talking about the word discovery, that generally doesn't mean sitting in your chair on ChatGPT or anything else and discovering something very finite, loop oriented, where you're just kind of interacting with ones and zeros. This actually means going out in the market and interacting with individuals and truly testing your hypotheses to say this works or this doesn't work. Certainly doesn't always mean that you have to be physical with somebody as far as being there in their presence and asking them questions, but a lot of times that is the case. So testing and testing your hypotheses and observing the results all in a real world and setting is very, very important. So I want to encourage that as we walk through this as an understanding. Okay, so first part of that, define hypothesis. Form a hypothesis that defines both the problem and the solution you're proposing. Simple way to frame this is to fill in the following sentence. My idea solves blank by doing blank. Form a hypothesis for problem, solution, customers, price, etc. So you can form a hypothesis around every part of what you're trying to discover. It's not just related to the market or the customer or the problem or solution. It's anything that you want to do discovery upon, right? So again, we go back to what we talked about in the first class and the kickoff as well. Think about that scientific method, right? So if we're going to go out there, we're going to observe a market space just to see what problems are out there. After we've done that, we need to start building hypotheses and kind of ideas on what a solution could be. We need to start testing that. Once we start testing that, we need to start testing kind of hypotheses around who the customers might be and what the values they might want to gain or pain points they want to alleviate, right? So all of these things are basically just asking questions that you want answers to. And the best way to do that is to observe them in their environment and ask people their opinions, ask people their context about how that problem affects them and what solutions they'd like to see or what solutions they might have that they're already implementing, right? So this is all about coming up with a test, basically, that you can test to find the results and get better information about your product. Define all your assumptions, right? Assumptions are not bad. They are all part of the process. And we're going to talk about biases here in a little bit as well, because they are very dangerous, but they're also, once you acknowledge them, they kind of help you break through the bias into finding real, true kind of information that you're looking for, insight level information of what you're looking for to give you clear understanding of what at least the customer insight is, of what their expectations are. But you do need to define your assumptions. You don't make assumptions and then keep those assumptions to yourself and never challenge those assumptions. That's when it's a problem. It's never a problem if you actually write those assumptions down, you challenge those assumptions, you bring those assumptions to bear, and then you look at the material that you created and say, check, that assumption's gone, check, that assumption's gone, check, that assumption was totally right, by the way. And yeah, I'm going to keep that one. So the idea is like, just keep going down every assumption you can possibly make and ensure that you're testing those assumptions to ensure that they're not just an assumption you've made without any validity of whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, right? The idea is that I can make all assumptions all day long. And if I keep to those assumptions and I'm blinded by those assumptions and I'm biased by those assumptions, and I never ask anybody, then I have created a problem for myself, which is creating a solution for a problem of one, meaning I don't care what anybody else is saying about the problem. And I'm creating a solution only with the information I have at my hand with my own kind of brain thought. And then nothing else is informed by anything else. Now, I could be very, very lucky and hit the nail on the head and solve the problem for everybody. It's a very common problem, but eventually I will miss the mark on the product and not be able to have any kind of lifetime value with a customer because it was a one and done kind of thing, more than likely, because I just guessed right, like a lightning strike hit me and I was like, yep, I got it right. The idea is that assumptions are bad if you leave them as assumptions. The assumptions are not bad as if you test those assumptions and validate those as either being fact or fiction. And I think that's a big part of what this is saying. The big part of this part of the process is make your assumption, define those, then go test those and turn them into fact or fiction. Also create customer personas. We're going to talk about that. You have tools in your toolkit, and we're going to show you a persona canvas here soon that shows you how to document and actually design a small piece of, a small canvas that shows you what the drivers are of a customer, what their pain points are, what their desires are for gains in their life, and then how you can match to those to give them those gains and alleviate those pains. So personas allow you to document your assumptions around who your prototypical customer is, and then taking that persona out into the discovery process to validate those as fact or fiction allows you to take that persona and say, this is the typical person, right? I thought it was, I made an assumption. Now I've gone out and tested that by talking to 100 people, and they have said that I was grossly inaccurate on what I thought this persona would be. And now I'm not. Now I know exactly what this type of person needs to be in order for me to sell my product to them. So where I'm delivering a solution that is alleviating their pains or providing them some sort of gains. Another tool is a customer journey. This is also a great way to map out your assumptions very early on. How is the customer going to maneuver their way through your product, both before, during, and after? Like, what is their experience? This is also really, really good if you really want to get to the kind of in detail of how they find you, how you attract them, how you engage them, and how they delight from your product. You know, we talked about that last week, but also how they find you on your website, how they make your order, how they get their product, how their product is delivered to them, how the customer satisfaction and retention process is, how they return their product if they need to. We're kind of giving you some e-commerce kind of examples, but just to make it easier. You know, these are all parts and touch points between you and your customer, and a journey map can tell you where all those points are. And then you can start saying, okay, I'm going to make these assumptions at each one of these points, but I'm going to validate each point when I'm working with my customers to make sure that this is the right process for that part of the journey. So I have the best experience for my customer, so they have the best experience with me, and I have the highest levels of customer satisfaction, or I save their life, or, you know, what have you, when it relates to whatever product you're building for whatever value you're trying to provide to that customer. Hit the street. This is what I said in that third thing too. I mean, you can't do this in a vacuum. You can't do this in your research lab and think that you're going to get very informed information from customers when you're not actually talking to customers. So you need to be in the environment. You need to be in the wild. Observe and meet the prospective customers where they are and doing what they're doing. In some cases, with the technologies we're talking about, that's very difficult to do. Sometimes we're talking about people that are in the hospital and they're suffering from grave diseases. But you can talk to the people that support those. You can talk to the family members. You can even talk to those individuals at certain times. But certainly there are people to talk to, and there's certainly information for you to observe, and there's certainly information for you to discover online about a prospective customer, right? So observe and meet the prospective customers wherever possible. Your audience, you need to meet them where they are. And understand what they're doing, how they're doing it, and what the impact is of doing that to them, both positive and negative. When you're doing market discovery, I mean, so when I have an idea, and I usually tell the same story, Juliana's probably heard this a couple of times. I usually, when I have an idea, I start off at home. I talk to my wife, who is also an entrepreneur. I talk to my son, who's also an entrepreneur, my daughter, my other son. We're all kind of entrepreneurs. My family, I'm a third generation entrepreneur, so I have no shortage of entrepreneurs to talk to in my family. And generally, they're very, very biased because, well, either they stopped listening to me after I got too technical, or they are just biased because we just talk, you know, they just, you know, because of just so many years of doing this. So I generally don't put a lot of credit in there, but what I utilize to them is to kind of get my words right. And then I go start talking to semi-family. Then I go talk to semi-not family, my friends and other people. And then I start talking to strangers. And eventually I'm talking to complete strangers. Like I'm just, you know, and my wife and I have done things where she wore a sandwich board that said, have you sold a house lately? Because we had a real estate product sitting at the Embarcadero in San Francisco, just really not being a nuisance, just standing there and eliciting people to come talk to her because she had a question on this big sandwich board that she was wearing, handing out little tchotchkes, little things for anybody who would walk by and talk to her. And she talked to about 60 people on one day. 2 or 3 of those people gave her about 5 minutes worth of information. One person with her kids talked to her for about 45 minutes. We had so much golden information from that one person that we were actually able to take that into a meeting we had that afternoon with a prospective client and really land that client because of information we found just that morning before, because my wife is so bold as to wear a sandwich board that basically had a challenge question on it that someone bid upon. And we had a really lengthy conversation with her about all of the assumptions that we were making that we wanted to validate with her. And she gave us a lot of great information about our product, right? So we really put ourselves out there. And sometimes it's difficult to do, but it just takes a little bit of courage. And sometimes it takes the right context. Hey, you know, you have to present it in the right way. You don't want to cost people or anything. I always like to say, you know, I'm doing a research study, or I'm in a class or something like that, or I'm building a product that might be beneficial to you. But I generally also find that if I'm in the environment where they're feeling the pain they're pretty willing to talk to me about a solution that could alleviate their pain. Be kind, positive. Positive stimulus yields positive results mostly. Ask non-leading questions when you're out there talking to customers and filling things out. You want to get open-ended questions for them, so you don't want to lead them anywhere. You want to let them go. That woman with her 3 kids kind of running around, she was very open-ended. We asked I think maybe we asked 5 real questions. I mean, certainly a lot of follow-up questions, but 5 main questions in 45 minutes. She did most of the talking, and that was great. We just kind of directed towards what the information we needed to find from her and what assumptions we wanted to validate. Document all your findings, and embody your inner therapist, right? So when you're asking these open-ended questions, generally ask, and how did that make you feel? What was the impact of that? Did it make you, and that's what you want. You want to kind of elicit the emotional response. You don't want to put them in a place where they're emotional, but you definitely want to put them in a place where they can be real and maybe even vulnerable about the pain or the gain that they're looking for. Follow the paths of interest to validate or disprove your hypotheses. Don't be afraid to be wrong. That's a big deal. I love it when I'm wrong, because then I can stop thinking about whatever I was trying to think about to find out if I was right or wrong. So if I had an idea and I talked to 10 people and they say I'm crazy, okay, I'll go talk to 10 more people. Now, if those 10 people say I'm crazy, I'm done. I'm not talking about that anymore, right? But if the first 10 people, if 2 people said I wasn't crazy, I'm going to talk to another 10 people. And if 2 people said I'm not crazy, I'm still going to talk to another 10 people. And if that group is more 50-50, I'm still going to go, right? Because what I'm doing is 2 + 2 + 5 + 10 + 20. I'm starting to gather a customer base there. So maybe out of the 100 that I've talked to, out of those 5 or 6 cycles, 30 to 40 of those individuals liked what I had to say. That's 30 to 40%. That's a market, right? That's a beachhead, right? So when I start talking to these individuals and I'm getting some sort of positive feedback from them, unless I'm getting total negative feedback, I am going to keep going based on any positive feedback I get to keep bettering the product and keep informing. Now, if I keep pitching the same product over and over again, regardless of it being positive or negative, and I never change anything, I'm not informing myself and my product, right? But I don't change it early on very often. As I move forward, I might do it through cycles and phases, where the first 20 people I talk to are going to get one thing, and then I'm going to go back and reform my hypotheses based on what I got from the first observations. Then go out to the next 20 people. I might even talk to 5 of the first 20 people. So you see where I'm getting at? It's like, I really deliberately go out and kind of look at this as a big science experiment, and they're my, mice in the maze, right? And I'm going out there and kind of testing things and understanding what's going on. I'm interacting with them. I'm seeing how the behaviors, and I'm documenting all that. And then I'm turning around and using that information to better my product, so I can come back to them and better the solution that I'm trying to bring to them. I'm also conditioning my customers, like I said, and sometimes, like with that person that we talked to for 45 minutes, we followed up with her and we sold the product to her when she was ready to sell her house, right? So sometimes we're even finding our early adopters and our innovators, the people that are going to buy from us first. We're conditioning our beachhead just through customer discovery. So that's how important this is. All right, a couple more bullets on this slide. This slide, I like every bullet, so I'm going to go through each one. The 5 whys, we talked about that last week. This is also where we said earlier, kind of channel your inner therapist. How does that make you feel? This is challenge your inner 3-year-old. Why? Why is the sky blue? Why is it like that? Why? You don't want to be incessant. You don't want to be kind of just a pain in the ass when you're talking to customers. So the whys can be that, get kind of painful. So you do want to have a certain number of whys. And know when to tail off, and know when to say thank you very much for your time. But don't be afraid to kind of ask more whys to kind of dig deeper into the information you're looking for. And then keep going until your hypothesis is fully proven or disproven, right? Don't start and stop just because you're getting to a point where you're discouraged. The closer you get to be discouraged about your product, the better off you are. I mean, if you're so high up on your product that you can't hear anything negative, then you're in trouble. If you start hearing more and more negative things, they're helping you compartmentalize what your product issues are. You can either overcome those, or you can understand that those are the things that are going to lead you to not wasting your time, right? So listen to what is being said and be okay with your hypotheses being disproven, proving false, and be okay with walking away from something that may have been a mistake for you to even attempt in the first place. And also understand that timing is everything. The top 2 reasons why startups succeed is due to timing and teams. Funding is actually the 5th at only 14%. Timing and teams are the 2 top. They make up over 60% of the successes of startups, actually all businesses of all sides. So if you have the right timing, you have the right team, that's more important. I'm not saying funding is not important. I'm saying 14% of the time, it's the reason why teams succeed, but only 14% of the time. 62% of the time, it's timing and team that cause that. About 42% of that is timing, right? So timing and understanding and going through this process are more important than even funding, but making sure you're taking the time and understanding the time is right. But understand that you might hear a lot of negative feedback today. That doesn't mean your solution should be thrown away. It might just mean your solution needs to be put on the shelf. And I have a product that I'm working with another team right now that did just that. It was on the shelf for several years, and now the timing is right, and they're starting to work on it. They've been working on it, just waiting for the right timing, and they're hitting the market as we speak. So the idea is like sometimes the solution is proven to be not worthy, but the worthiness is only because it's not the right time. Okay, this one, mostly this bullet here at the top: evaluate, refine, rinse, and repeat. Right? You keep doing this. You keep doing this. We show the squirrely thing, then it kind of straightened out, it kind of flattened out, then it went squirrely again. You keep doing this until you have all your information that you need to make a best first step on your minimum viable prototype, and then your minimum viable product that you put out there that generates revenue. And then you keep doing this over and over again. You should constantly be asking customers, your existing customers and new customers, what do they think about your product. If you're not doing that and you're not listening to your customers, then you're losing them slowly but surely. Okay, so the customer development process is a series of activities an organization takes to discover, test, and validate its business. Starts off with customer discovery. We just talked about that. Understanding the customer and then validating that customer, customer creation, and company building, right? So we spend in this first part of just like, who is our customer, what our market segmentation is, and just continuously validating that customer and going back and forth until we have a truly validated customer and an understanding of what that is. And that takes customer discovery, what we just talked about, to do that. But who is our target customer? Who ultimately benefits from your product? Who is consuming your product, who is paying for your product, who is feeling the pain, and who has something to gain. These are the answers that you have to get to once you've figured out what the customer's information, what the customers you're talking to. So you can just you can make assumptions, but once you go out there and start testing assumptions, these are the answers that you're going to start getting from out at the other end. Who is the target customer? Who ultimately will benefit from this product? Is it the 5-year-old son and daughter, or is it the parent? Is it the doctor, or is it the patient? It's got to be an understanding of who truly is going to be the benefactor of this product, who is going to be consuming it, and who is going to be paying for it. We've talked about this a couple of times. If you're in an insurance situation, a third-party payer might be there, and the court, through your business or through your job, they might be paying for all of what your patient care is. But you are the consumer on the other end getting all the patient care, right? So the customer satisfaction resolves with you, but the payment doesn't necessarily revolve with you. So there's multifaceted, multi-segmented customer situation going on there. So who is the consumer, which you have to satisfy, and who is the payer, which you have to satisfy? So both sides of that have to be satisfied in the transaction. And who is feeling the pain of not having this product, and who is getting something as a gain by having this product? And that can be the same person. But it doesn't always have to be. Like if you have something where it's helping a child not feel pain, that's obviously giving the child some pain-free relief, but it's also in essence helping the parent certainly have a child who's pain-free, but that provides a lot less, certainly a lot less stress on the parent to be able to do things. And so that's providing a lot of benefit to the parent as well. So you got to understand the pains and the gains might be the end user, the end customer. It might be something upstream from them. And somebody willing to pay a lot of money when they're actually not the one who's utilizing the product. Okay, so other things to know. Where are they located? Knowing your audience is one thing. knowing where your audience is equally as important. You have to be where your audience is, or your product needs to be where your audience is. It's not there, and it's not there in a timely fashion. It's not there when they're needing it, then it's just not valuable, right? How do I access them, and how do they access my product? That's also very important. We talked about the customer journey earlier. That's why that's so important. How do they access it? Do they go through a website? Are they ordering it through, is it prescribed to them? Are they ordering it through, a third party? And how do they, how do they access my product? How does that product get to them? What does the supply chain look like to get my product to them? Do I have to give it to one party that then packages it into another product, that packages it into another product, and is then bundled into another service by another company that's then sold in bulk to a hospital, right? That might be 3 or 4 things upstream from my product that is now grouped, packaged, assembled, and bundled in 4 different ways before it's even given to my end user, which also means it has to be transacted 3 or 4 different times. And I'm getting a percentage of that on the tail end at the back end, right? So there's a lot of things that I have to understand of where my product is going, how it gets to my end customer, and when it goes through from point A to point Z. Also, what are the barriers? And what are the capabilities to buy my product that are brought from buying my product? What are the buying tendencies, and what are the influencers? Why are people buying my product, and what is influencing them to buy my product? These are talking about and moving into buying behaviors and different things like that, and biases that I told you we talked about as well. All right, grab a sip here. Okay, so you'll have this deck, and this is a great website to go to. And I think this is kind of a fun conversation to have with yourselves generally, or with your friends or family or what have you. These are 50 kind of biases, but I only have 5 here to go through today. But you can kind of start thinking about how these would affect a market or an individual or yourself as a founder as you're going through understanding how to build your market segmentation, understand who your market segments are, right? So groupthink, due to a desire for conformity and harmony in a group, we make irrational decisions, often to minimize conflict. Sally wants to go to get ice cream. Francis wants to shop for t-shirts. You suggest getting t-shirts with pictures of ice cream on them instead. It's just a way of compromise. When you have a large group of people, you tend to compromise. Products get compromised all the time by group thought, right? So you really need to break through that group thought to get to the individual, because you don't know how the group is biasing, is adding bias to the individual, right? So if you take a family unit, that family unit could be biasing, adding bias to the product that is unnecessary for the one person inside that group that is actually in need of that process, or in need of that product, the way it's supposed to be for that one person, right? So these are just examples, right? I'm not saying any one of our products fall into these spaces. I just wanted to give you some kind of examples of what it is that you will face when you're talking to customers. Bandwagon effect, ideas, fads, beliefs grows as more people adopt them. Sally believes fidget spinners help her children. Francis does too, right? So the power of suggestion, very, very, very powerful, right? So this is something that happens all the time. We can see it happening every day. Something gets something. This is FOMO. This is something that you're just kind of following along because somebody else got that. Sometimes for product people, this works great. I'm going to build something that some person wants, then another person is going to want what they want, and the other person is going to work what they want. So sometimes when I talk about these biases, I'm not talking about removing the biases. I'm talking about taking advantage of the biases, right? So if you have a product that is very sticky, very catchy, you can have something that one group wants that can make another group want it as well. So these biases can work in both ways. False consensus. We believe more people agree with us than is actually the case. This is a founder bias a lot of times, right? And you will also need to understand this when you're talking to your potential customers doing customer discovery. If you hear these words, well, a lot of people think, false consensus. I hear all the time. Dozens of people have told me. These are all generally statements for someone who doesn't have the facts, who's trying to add to the larger picture of things, of saying, I believe this, and I believe a lot of other people believe this. We believe more people agree with us than is actually the case. This happens all the time. And trust me, every one of us is guilty of this, right? And you can probably think back to one of the three things I said. And if you think back, maybe over the last month, you may have said one of these things to someone else when you're talking about anything. Could be about anything, right? So we all have a little bit of these biases about all sorts of things. It doesn't mean you're a bad person at all. It means you're a normal human being who has biases about things that you're passionate about. And sometimes we win arguments or debates or discussions or talks, whatever you want to talk about it, by providing a bias of false consensus. Okay. So when you hear it, and the reason I bring it up is because when you're talking customer discoveries and you hear those things, you need to have a little, red flag that says, or yellow flag, or whatever the color is that you want to choose for that, and says, okay, I'm not going to challenge this customer and say, okay, well, that sounds like BS because you just said lots of people instead of specific people. It's more or less like, okay, check. They said they probably have some false consensus bias here. So I need to talk to more people to make sure I'm hearing the same thing. And if I'm hearing the same thing, their false consensus was merely true to them, but they're not wrong, right? So here's the important thing is like, they might have a bias because they haven't done the research, but they might also not be wrong. And that's the sticky wicket of these things. It's like seeing the bias, marking the bias in your head of being a bias or an assumption, but then validating it to understand whether it's truly something you should pay attention to or something you should dismiss. Because although it might be a bias, doesn't mean it's false. That's how biases work sometimes. They mask the fact or fiction. Curse of knowledge. This one happens a lot with people that have a lot of knowledge. Once we know something, we assume everyone else knows it too. It's very difficult. And so I bring this one up there because when you're building your pitch decks and you're building your problem statements, we really need to make sure that, and something that I stress on a lot, is that when you're pitching your pitch deck, you can't assume that everyone knows what you're talking about. You can't assume that everyone is at your level of understanding of the science of things and of the technology of things. And a good way of doing that is not necessarily breaking it down to such a common person level, but what I like to do is resonating it with a common a common context, right? Something that they can resonate with, right? So exemplifying something in a different way that shows them a way that they can kind of bring their mind to it without them kind of thinking that they're dumb or thinking that they just can't get to that, or that I'm at such a high level that that they're just not going to be able to understand what I'm talking about, right? Because they just don't have the knowledge, right? So the curse of knowledge cuts both ways. One is like, you can't understand what I'm saying because I know too much. So once we know something, we assume everyone else does. The other side of it is like, you know too much. I'm never possibly going to be able to understand what you're saying, so I'm not going to listen, right? So the idea is challenge yourself, saying, hey, I might have a lot of knowledge about this, but I need to explain this to a person so they don't turn me off because they just think this is above them intellectually. And then framing effect. We often draw different consensus or conclusions from the same information depending on how it's presented. Alice hears that the favorite candidate is killing it with a 45% approval rating. Sally hears that the candidate is disappointing in the country with 45% rating. They have wildly different interpretations of the same statistic, right? So it's looking at two different things in two different ways, right? So framing is very important. That's the context around it. That's how we're talking about these problem statements, the solution statements. It's all about the framing to make sure that you're kind of putting it in a context that gives your product and what you're trying to sell its best opportunity to carry the message across of why it's valuable or what the benefits are of buying the product to a customer. So I challenge you to go out and look at this webpage. There's another 45 of these out there. Some of them are pretty darn funny. They're all very enlightening to kind of say and see and kind of actualization, self-realization opportunity for you as well, of looking at these things and kind of saying, oh, I kind of do that, or I did that today to a friend, or gosh, that's my brother or my sister. He does that to me all the time. Next time I'm going to challenge on, So, and you can hear other things like you might hear biases all the time, and now you'll be able to hear them a little bit differently if you go to the site and look at some of these things and be able to kind of get them out of your way of sorts if they're your biases or when you hear them from other people during customer discovery. Okay. All right, so this is one of my favorite things, and the link is down in the bottom hand corner there, the behavioralmodel.org, and this is by a I think his name's Thomas Fogg, Fogg behavioral model. And this is, and I use slightly different terminology, but it explains it the same way. Virtually every decision that a customer makes is based off of three things: the ability, the trigger, and the motivation, right? So I need ability to do something, I need a motivation to do something, and I need a trigger to do something. And I usually explain it this way. Let's say I'm a college student and I have just an old beater of a car, but it starts every single time and it gets me to class every single day. And I just got a little job after school, and I don't need anything other than something to give me to my job, give me my class. And that 72 Nissan works great. Okay. 72, 92, 2002. We'll say that 2002 Nissan works great. All right. So everything's good. I graduate from college, and I get a good job. But old Betsy still gets me from point A to point B. I don't really need anything. Right. But I'm 6 months into this job. I got a little capital sitting aside, and that new Nissan just came out, and it's pretty sharp looking. Right. And I'm not really making the money to afford it yet, but I'm pretty interested in that. And then a year passes and I get a raise, right? I'm about sick of Betsy, but that raise is putting more money in my pocket, and I can absolutely, since it's about $1,500 more a month that I'm making, I can absolutely afford that $500 car note for that new Nissan. So I've got the motivation and I've now got the ability, right? But I'm also thinking about asking my girlfriend to marry me, and there's kind of some of these other things that maybe I shouldn't spend that money and so on and so forth. Then I go to the car next day, and the car, Betsy won't start. I take it to the mechanic. She tells me that it's going to cost me $4,000 to fix that car. And I tell her, Betsy ain't worth $4,000. And she tells me, no, she ain't. Now I got my trigger, right? So that was a long definition of what my ability, trigger, ability, motivation, and trigger is, right? But if you shorten that, you can even do this by impulse buying, right? I go and I'm at the store and I am waiting in line at the end cap, and there is something there that I like. I will real quickly go through these three things. Do I like it and want it? Is my motivation there? Yes. Do I have the $5 in my pocket that I could spend it on? Yes. Is wasting my $5 on this thing better than putting $5 in my gas, my car? No, I'm on empty. I need to put the $5 in my gas, my car. No, I got a full tank. I can buy this right now. See where the trigger was? So even on an impulse buy, I can go through these three things, right? So every decision is based on this same Fogg behavioral model in theory. So most decisions for sure. So when you start thinking about the Fogg behavioral model, and this is why I teach this in every class that I do around this, because I want to give you an understanding of where this action line is in the context of how you build your narrative, how you build your understanding around your product, how you start looking at your value proposition that we'll start talking about next week, and how you're going to say, okay, if I understand the behavior of buying from a customer, and it's this algorithm, or this math, this little formula here, then I understand what it's going to take. All I got to do is kind of figure out the triggers, right? And then I need to look for the customers that have the motivation and the ability, certainly the ability. So if I'm saying I want to pick customers between the ages of 25 and 45 with an average income of $45,000 to $65,000, so on and so forth, then I can start picking a customer base, a segmentation that has the right abilities that I need. Then I just need to figure out how to motivate them. And then if I can also have the triggers, then I know that I'm going to get to the point where they're going to buy product from me, right? So understanding this little, also three-legged stool of a formula of how to manipulate buying behavior is very important when I'm starting to kind of figure out how to put my product to market and how to get customers to buy my product. Okay, so we talked about the persona canvas. This is one of my favorite tools graphically to show you how we need to kind of draft what a typical customer would be, but I don't have a customer in mind necessarily. I don't really know what the customer is. I haven't gone to talk to anybody. This is me building a hypothesis based on the information I have. So And I have a couple of these different canvases, but I think this one's kind of like the most graphically pleasing as far as being able to explain it to you. So I have these kind of trends of what impacts a typical customer, right? So the big picture is at the top, right? So what are the negative trends that are from the environment that are around my customer? The positive trends are on the other side. So what are the big picture things? These are the things are well out of their control. I mean, it might be the environment, it might be the literal environment, it could be also the economy, it could be the government, it could be their local community. It's everything that's in and around them that they really don't have much control over, but does impact them either positively or negatively. Then the next level down is their headaches and their opportunities. These are the things that are kind of in their local sphere. They can influence, they can even impact, but they're still a little bit out of their control. So this is at their professional work level related issues, or at their home, but it's just something that's related to them, but it's not interpersonal to them. And then the last level down is the fears and the hopes. This is also expressed as pains and gains. Fears, what I'm afraid of, personal issues, things that might motivate me negatively internally. And then what are my hopes, my aspirations, personal goals and hopes that would cause me to reach for aspirations, reach for positive gains and hopes in my future, right? So these are the things that kind of affect me, impact me, and I might want to understand from a customer to see how, going back to what I'm saying, the motivations, the triggers, and different things like that to get them to get me an understanding, of what a typical customer would look like, and what the motivations are, what the trends are, what the catalysts are for them to make decisions, right? What the negative trends are at the environmental level, what their local sphere are, and what their interpersonal things that are going on. Also, I can kind of fit that heart in the middle of what their need is. What does this person really want, right? And just understand, they might not know what they really want, okay? Nor they might not know what they really need. They might be able to express it, but going through this research and discovery process, you might be able to break through what they're expressing as something they feel they need, but they don't understand how to express actually what they need until you've done this for them. In some cases, you've broken through that and built them a product that they didn't actually realize they needed. And if you do that, you have a customer for a very loyal customer. Okay, looks like I went the wrong direction. Okay, all right. So we're at 7 o'clock, about 30 minutes ahead of schedule, which is good. So I wanted to go over homework, and we'll do a little Q&A as well. Looks like my camera's lagging a little bit. So first of all, finish the problem and solution statements. Okay, I think that's probably the first thing. Second of all, define and document your expected customer market segment types, right? High level, right? Is your customer a segmented customer, or is your customer like a primary customer that you can go directly with? Is it an industry customer? Are you going to license your product? I mean, just give me your high level thoughts. There's no wrong answers. Okay. That's one thing I want to understand is like, I want you to understand there's not a wrong answer as it related to this. Just pausing for 1 second to make sure I'm having internet issues. Could someone come on their video to make sure they're still hearing me, seeing me? My video is frozen. So you're still good? We're still good?
We can hear you.
Right,
your video is frozen, but
yeah, that's fine. We're on the tail end, and I don't care about my video just as long as y'all can still hear my audio. Okay. All right. So problem statement, solution statement, and then just give me your thoughts on market segmentation, right? Just your thoughts. We're gonna have a conversation about that. No wrong answers. Same with this next one. Define your primary customers and or consumer of your products, and identify any third-party influencers. So these 3 bullets are really just the start of a conversation next week when we start talking about value propositions. So really your only true homework is to finish your solution statement, refine your problem statement, and then start jotting down some of your thoughts around customers, right? Who do you think your product's customers are? Who do you think your primary customers are? Who do you think the influencers are? Give me all your thoughts around your products as it relates to market and customers. And again, no wrong answers. We're going to talk about this as a cohort so everybody can contribute, and we'll come to a solution after next week around who your consumers and your customers are, so you can really run with that afterwards with your unique value proposition and everything else. So we'll do this collectively next Thursday. Any questions? Okay. Free tickets to LSTCon, November 8th. I'll be there. Lots of people will be there. And it should be pretty good. So keep that in mind. We'll send out some more information. Cam gave you his email address as well as a couple of links. We'll follow back up with that. That link should give you a free ticket, or will give you a free ticket. I got office hours tomorrow, so if you need some additional time, reach out to me. If I can't meet with you tomorrow, we'll schedule some time for early next week. All I can say is it's a pleasure talking with y'all and working with you. I know I do a lion's share of the talking during most of this stuff, but this is kind of what I do and what I enjoy doing. So hopefully you're taking something away from this and learning. That's always my goal, is that you walk away with learning something. And generally at the end, we always see some really fantastic presentations. So the proof is usually in the pudding at the end, when people walk off with some really huge standing ovations with the presentations. So and you know, everyone's sharing in $10,000 worth of prize money, which is always great. So you know, let me know if you have any questions. You got my contact information. Reach out to me, and I'm happy to help in any way. Okay, as always, this will be put up on YouTube tomorrow, and I'll send out a link, and let me know if you need anything. All right, take care, everybody.